Andrés Bonifacio didn't rise from privilege or politics. He rose from grief, hunger, and the muddy alleys of Tondo. While others rode in cafes, he sold paper fans in the street. While elites called for reform, he carved out revolution. He built the Katipunan not with silver or speeches, but with blood-signed oaths and blades hidden beneath homes. He didn't beg Spain for change, he dared to take it. And when he tore his cedula, he wasn't just rejecting Spain, he was declaring that the Filipino was done kneeling. Bonifacio didn't wear polished boots or military medals. He wore worn-out slippers and resolve. Though betrayed, though buried in silence, his legacy screams louder than any anthem. He wasn't the face they printed on coins, but he was the fire that made the flag possible. This isn't the hero history preferred. This is the one history owes. Andrés Bonifacio lit the match. This is the story of what burned and what rose from it. Bonifacio was born on November 30, 1863, in Tondo, a district alive with commerce, noise, and hardship. His father was a tailor, his mother a factory worker. When they both died, Andrés was just 14. He became the provider for his siblings, making and selling paper fans and posters in the streets. But he didn't just work with his hands, he sharpened his mind. He read the novels of Rizal, Hugo, and Dumas, absorbing stories of rebellion, justice, and courage. He never entered a university, but life taught him hard lessons. He learned that poverty wasn't weakness, it was fuel, and the pain of the poor could become power in the right hands. He didn't envy the wealthy. He simply believed the Filipino, even the barefoot child in Tondo, deserved to rise. In the shadows of colonial Manila, Bonifacio's fire began to form, quietly, steadily, with every step he took through the dust and smoke of the streets. On July 7, 1892, after Rizal's exile, Bonifacio made his move. That same day, he and a few brave men founded the Katipunan, a secret society with one goal: independence. They met in back rooms, signed their names in blood, and pledged their lives to the cause. Bonifacio wasn't interested in diplomacy or patience. He believed freedom had to be seized, not begged for. Women joined the fight too, including Gregoria de Jesus, Bonifacio's wife, who guarded documents and ran messages through city streets. The Katipunan grew in silence, fueled by printed pamphlets, whispered oaths, and smuggled blades. Bonifacio turned grief into movement, words into weapons. He didn't claim to be a prophet. He simply saw what others were too afraid to admit, that the time for talk had passed. The time to act had arrived. The Katipunan wasn't born in comfort. It was born in fear, and in the choice to face it. In August 1896, the Katipunan was discovered. There was no more hiding. Bonifacio called his men to Pugad Lawn. Tension hung in the air. Then he tore his cedula, a Spanish ID document, and threw it to the ground. Others followed, dozens, then hundreds. The papers flew like ash in the wind. It was an act of rebellion that would echo for centuries. The Spaniards called it treason. Bonifacio called it freedom. They didn't have cannons or uniforms. Just bolos, courage, and a cause. That single act, tearing paper, transformed fear into unity. It became the first open cry of revolution. From that day on, Bonifacio was no longer a clerk or organizer. He was a revolutionary leader. He didn't wait for history to name him. He tore through it with his own hands. The sun rose on a new chapter in Filipino identity, written not in ink, but in defiance. After the first battles in San Juan and nearby towns, it became clear the Katipunan was underpowered and fractured. Bonifacio led bravely but lacked formal training. In the mountains of Morong, he was wounded and fell ill. While he recovered in the jungle, leadership slipped from his hands. In Cavite, factions under Emilio Aguinaldo were gaining power, organizing more effectively, and gaining favor. The movement Bonifacio started was beginning to leave him behind. Rumors of his weakness grew. Letters were ignored. Allies turned silent. He wasn't just fighting the Spanish anymore, he was fighting irrelevance. And despite his fever, he understood something deeper. Revolutions weren't lost by defeat, they were lost by division. As the jungle closed in, Bonifacio watched a nation he had sparked slowly slip out of his grasp, not because of foreign strength, but because of internal fracture. The Tejeros Convention of March 1897 was meant to unify the revolution. Instead, it exposed the fractures. Cavite leaders pushed for elections. Bonifacio agreed, hoping unity would follow. But what he found was mockery. Laughed at for lacking education, dismissed as inferior, Bonifacio watched as Aguinaldo was declared president. Bonifacio himself was elected Secretary of the Interior, but when his qualifications were challenged, he walked out, declaring the proceedings null and void. He saw through the illusion. This wasn't about unity, it was about control. He issued his own declaration, rejecting the new leadership. But the tide had already turned. What started in Tondo now belonged to Cavite. Bonifacio wasn't just being pushed aside, he was being erased. And the revolution, once fueled by the poor, was being repackaged by those with power. Soon after Tejeros, Bonifacio and his brother Procopio were arrested by Aguinaldo's men. He was charged with sedition, rebellion, and treason, against the very revolution he had started. Wounded and weak, Bonifacio faced a sham trial. No real defense, no due process. The verdict was death. Aguinaldo reportedly tried to commute the sentence, but the order was ignored, or never sent. Bonifacio and his brother were taken to the mountains of Maragondon. On May 10, 1897, they were executed, one by gunfire, the other with a blade. No flag was raised, no honors were given. The revolution had killed its own father. Bonifacio died not on the battlefield, but in betrayal. His name was buried for years, his role overshadowed by those who survived. But history has a way of correcting its course. And what was once silenced now stands. The man who gave the revolution its soul paid for it with his life. Bonifacio was not the hero of classrooms or currency. He wore no barong, wrote no novels, and held no office. He died with no ceremony, no farewell. But in dying, he gave the revolution its fire. His legacy was not carved by titles, it was earned in silence, sacrifice, and struggle. He spoke for those who couldn't, fought for those who wouldn't, and gave everything he had, knowing he'd likely never see the flag he imagined. But that flag rose anyway, and in its folds is the voice of a poor man from Tondo who refused to kneel. Today, statues rise where silence once stood. His image, now carved in stone, stands in place of the grave he never had. Because heroes like Bonifacio aren't written, they are remembered, brick by brick, in the freedom they sparked. And though his bolo rests in bronze, his spirit remains unsheathed in every heart that dares to say, Mabuhay ang Kalayaan.